Now, the reason is that before the lesson, the pupils didn't know how to recite the 1, 2, 3 up to 20. They didn't know how to recite. But now they are able to do that. And that is what they couldn't do before. And I made a point earlier on that learning is relatively permanent change. It means that change in behavior, it is neither fixed nor transitory. It is possible that some of the pupils, if not all, may forget what they have learned, or the 1, 2, 3 that they learned. Some of them may forget. I also want to draw your attention that changes or change in behavior which result from alcohol is not learning. So if you take alcohol or anything or drug, and there is a change in your behavior, to the behaviorist, it is not learning. So when we talk of a change in behavior, we are referring to a change in behavior that is desirable. Behaviorism will help you to understand the behaviorism paradigm. The first one I want to talk about has to do with classical conditioning theory. Classical conditioning theory. Classical conditioning theory. Now, Pavlov, an educational psychologist, wanted to know how human beings or organisms learn. So he used a dog in his experiment. Now, what he did was that in the first instance, he presented food to a dog, and the dog salivated. Now, he rang a bell, and there was no salivation. So he decided to pair the ringing of the bell and the presentation of the food. So he will ring the bell and then present food, and then the dog will salivate. He did that for a considerable period of time. Now, it came to a time that when the bell goes, in the absence of the food, salivation will occur. So what do you think might have happened? The dog associated the ringing of the bell, the presentation of the food. And so to the behaviorist, when the dog salivated, it means the dog associated the ringing of the bell and the presentation of the food. So to the behaviorist, learning has taken place. Learning has taken place because there was a change in the behavior of the dog. In other words, the dog did something or responded to what later when I will explain, environmental stimulus. And according to, or one of the principles of learning that we can derive from this experiment is that human beings or organisms learn through stimulus-response connection. Human beings learn through stimulus-response connection. And remember, the dog associated the ringing of the bell, the presentation of the food. And so anytime the bell goes without even or in the absence of the food, salivation occurred. Another experiment that was performed by one psychologist called Skinner, and that has to do with operant conditioning theory. Operant conditioning theory. Operant conditioning theory is a method of learning that occurs through rewards and punishment for behavior, or it's a method of learning that focuses on rewards and punishment. Now, Skinner designed a box, and in the box there was what we now will call a bottom. And the bottom was green. And Skinner put the animal, let's use dog, in the box. And through random experiment, when the dog was put in the box, through random experiment, the dog incidentally pressed the green button, and the door to the box opened. And outside the box was a reward, or let's take it a food. So the dog ate the food. Now the dog was put back to the box and repeated the act by pressing the green button through random experiment. Now it came to a time that anytime the dog was put in the box, it took the dog lesser time to press the green button. Why? Because the dog associated the pressing of the button, the pressing of the green button, and then opening of the door, and then the food that was outside, which happens to be the reward. So we can say that learning has taken place because the dog learned how to press the green button anytime it was put in the box. Now, after this experiment, Skinner again performed another experiment, and this time he used the same box, but inside the box we had a red button. The green button was removed, and whenever you press on the red button, you receive a shock, or a shock will take place. So when the dog was put inside the box, as usual, through random movement, the dog pressed the red button and it received shock. So the dog refrained from pressing the button, the red button, anytime it was put inside the box, because it associated the pressing of the button with shock. It means learning has taken place from the perspective of the behaviorist. Now, we can explain two key terms in this experiment: reinforcement and punishment. And remember, when the dog pressed the green button, it received reward in the form of food. Whereas when it pressed the red button, it received shock, and that is synonymous with punishment. So what is reinforcement? Reinforcement is anything that causes a behavior to be repeated, or any event that will increase desirable behavior. For example, if you praise a student for giving the right response to a question, if you tell the student, "Great, you have done well, excellent, that was very thoughtful of you," you have heaped praise on the learner or the student, and that is what we call reinforcement. Reinforcement, we have two types. We have positive reinforcement and we have negative reinforcement. Now, the positive reinforcement has to do with adding or giving something to an organism, or for that matter, a learner. You know, I talk about praising a people or a student for giving the right response. So that is what we call positive reinforcement. And positive reinforcement will increase desirable behavior, in this case in the learner, by giving right response. So the mere fact that the student has been praised for doing the right thing, the student will make the cautious effort to give a right response next time a question is posed. And that is positive reinforcement. And remember, when the dog pressed the green button and the door opened, or the door to the box opened, because of the reward or the food outside. So the next time the dog was put inside the box, it repeated an act. It repeated the act because it was reinforced. And remember, reinforcement is anything or event that will cause a behavior to be repeated. We also have negative reinforcement. Now, with a negative reinforcement, it is a situation where we have to remove something in order for a desirable behavior to occur. For example, I know most students do not like quizzes. So I have 3 assignments that I've lined up for, let's say, my student for the semester. And I have 2 quizzes. Now, I want students to learn how to turn in their assignment on time. And we all know the effect of assignment. When you give assignment, sometimes they have to go beyond, students have to go beyond just the note that they have been given. They have to conduct research in order to be able to, for them to be able to do the assignment or meet the requirement of the assignment. All that I'm saying is that, let's say I want my student to learn how to read outside the note that they have been given. And so I will tell them that if the assignment, let's say I want them to do 3 assignments within the semester. So I can say that if they turn in the 3 assignments on time, I am going to cancel one of the quizzes. And remember, I said they are supposed to do 2 quizzes in a semester or within the semester. So by turning in the assignment, the 3 assignment on time, I'll cancel one of the quizzes. Now, in this case, I have removed something that I know my students do not enjoy. Nobody enjoys taking quizzes. So that is what we call negative reinforcement. So negative reinforcement, something has to be removed in order for the desirable behavior to occur. And in this case, the desirable behavior that I want to see in my student is turning in the assignment on time. Okay. We also have punishment. And remember, when we're discussing the operant conditioning theory, we talk about how the dog was punished by pressing the red button. So punishment, what is punishment? What is punishment? Now, punishment is anything that will cause undesirable behavior to decrease. Punishment is anything that will cause undesirable behavior to decrease. So for example, a student comes to school very late, and the student is asked to go to weed maybe the school park or school farm or something. Now, we want the student to come to school on time. So by asking the student to do the weeding, we want the student to put up good behavior. Now, we have two types of punishment. We have positive punishment and we have negative punishment. We have positive punishment and we have negative punishment. Now, with a positive punishment, we need to inflict pain, or what we call aversive stimulus. So we know that caning, students do not like it. Nobody likes caning. So by caning a student, you have inflicted pain, and that is positive punishment. I am not saying caning is good. I'm not saying go and cane your student. No. There are other ways that you can punish your student, and we'll be discussing that. So we are talking about positive punishment. With positive punishment, you add. And when you cane a student, it's like you have added something, or you have inflicted pain, or asking the student to go and weed, or clean a school compound, or do something that you know the student doesn't like. Then we also have negative punishment. Negative punishment. Now, with the negative punishment, something will have to be taken away in order to decrease undesirable behavior. So let's take, for example, that let's say I'm teaching, and in the course of my teaching, a student misbehaves. And I'll tell the student that because you misbehave when I was teaching, you are not going out for break when it is time for break. In that case, or in that sense, I have taken away something from the people or the student. Others are out there enjoying their break, but I'm in the classroom with the student. So that is what we call negative punishment. Something will have to be taken away in order for undesirable behavior to decrease. Okay. So what are the main points of behaviorism from what I've said so far, or what can we deduce from the two experiments and the key terms that I explained, like punishment and reward? One, behaviorists believe that knowledge exists independently and outside the learner. In other words, the behaviorists view the learner as a blank slate or tabula rasa. And for that matter, it is the duty of the teacher or instructor to provide all the learning experiences. So to the behaviorists, the learner has nothing to offer during the teaching and learning process, because there is nothing in the mind of the learner. It is the duty of the teacher or the instructor to put ideas into the head of the learner. Another principle that we can derive from the experiment, or the two experiments, is that the organism or the learner merely responds to environmental stimuli. The learner responds to environmental stimuli. So to the behaviorists, everything is about the teacher. The learner is passive. It is the teacher who has to initiate the learning process, and the learner will have to respond. So for example, if you are teaching students have to recite the multiplication table. For example, 2 times 2. So the teacher will recite and the student repeat after the teacher. So everything is about the teacher. The learner is passive, and that they respond to environmental stimuli. To the behaviorists, the learning process is based on observable changes in behavior. And remember, the change in behavior is what they call learning. So if you claim to have learned something, we should see a change. It should be obvious. Everybody should see it. So remember the example that I gave. Teacher teaching pupils 1, 2, 3 up to 20. So if the students are able to recite from 1 to 20, that was the objective the teacher said. It means change, there is a change in their behavior, and it's obvious because the learners are able to recite for everybody to hear. Behaviorists also define learning simply as the acquisition of new behavior or change in behavior. Behaviorists also believe that learning begins when a stimulus from the environment is presented and the learner reacts to that stimulus with a type of response. And remember the example that I just gave. So let's take, for example, that the teacher has written the 2 times 2, the multiplication table that the teacher wants the student to learn on a manila card. So the teacher will show it to the student and then say it, and then they also repeat it. They will do that over and over until such a time that the student or the pupils are able to recite the 2 times 2 without the intervention of the learner or help from the learner. Another important principle we can derive from the behaviorist learning paradigm is that the new behavioral pattern can be repeated so that it becomes automatic. The new behavioral pattern can be repeated so that it becomes automatic. So if the learners are able to recite, for example, ABC, after they have been taught, if they are able to say it, we can say it as it is automatic because they are able to recite it without the help from the teacher. We can also say that teachers, or we can use reward and punishment to shape the behavior of the learner or the child. So when the learner acts in a way that is desirable, we can reinforce the learner. And if the learner behaves in a way that is appalling or undesirable, we can punish the learner. And we have discussed the 2 types of reinforcement and the 2 types of punishment. Okay, so let's discuss the educational implications of the behaviorist paradigm. Educational implications. I do not want us to limit ourselves to the classroom. I don't want us to say educational classroom implications of behaviorism, because we can apply the behaviorist principles or learning paradigm outside the classroom. 1, lessons should be delivered gradually or little by little, in other words, smaller chunks, so that the learner can follow the lesson. So as a teacher, when you are delivering instruction, you need to deliver the lesson gradually and little by little, and present the content that the student will be able to deal with, so that the learners will be able to follow. Another educational implication is that material to be learned by the learners should be arranged systematically and in sequential manner, from simple to complex, and the subsequent ones should build on the previous ones. For example, we teach addition before subtraction, and then before we go to multiplication. So you start with the simple ones, or what the learner will find it easy to understand. Then gradually you'll be introducing the difficult ones. Now, because the behaviorists view the learner as tabula rasa, or blank slate, in other words, there is nothing in the mind of the learner, it is important for teachers to be careful of the content that they present, because whatever you are going to present is what the learners are going to store in their memories, because we believe that the learner has nothing to offer and they don't know anything. So it is our duty to put the information in their heads. And so we have to be careful of the kind of information or the kind of content that we present to our learners, because of the fact that the learner mind is viewed as empty. Now, to the behaviorists, the learner is passive recipient of environmental stimuli. In other words, the learner is not active. Everything is about the teacher. But that is not the case. As teachers, there is the need for us to involve our learners in the teaching and learning process. We need to assign them tasks that will help them to fully participate in the lesson that we are presenting. If possible, assign tasks that will require that they work in groups, smaller groups, and you can also lead a discussion which will also enable every member in the class to contribute or to ask questions. Another educational implication is that teachers should encourage students to progress at their own pace, because individual differences exist. So you don't expect all your learners to be able to grasp the concept at a go. Some will understand at the first instance, others it will take some time. Others, in fact, you need to maybe make take additional steps or make additional effort for them to be able to understand the concept. So it is important for you as a teacher to help your learners to progress at their own pace. It is also important to, as teachers, reinforce the behaviors, good behaviors that we want our learners to repeat. The good behaviors that we want our learners to repeat, it is important for us to reinforce or reward them. Remember, we said if a student should give a right response to a question, just say something, pass a positive comment like, well done, that was great, keep it up. All right. Another educational implication is that assessment should be encouraged with prompt feedback. assessment should be encouraged with prompt feedback. Now, how do you know that your learners have understood the lessons? It is through assessment. So we conduct assessment for us to know whether our students are following the lesson or they are not following the lesson. So when you assess, it is important for us, for your student to have the feedback. The feedback or the assessment, it could be oral. For example, you pose a question to the class. A student will respond. You have to manage the response, whether it is right response or it is not the right response. When a student gives a response, don't neglect the student. Let's say the student give a response that is not the correct one. Don't neglect the student and call another person to respond to the question. You need to let the class know whether that response given by the student was the right one or it was not the right one. In other words, you have to manage all responses, whether they are right or wrong. So the response came. Let the class know whether it was right or it was not right. For example, you can say that, yeah, you have tried, but this is not the answer I am looking for. Then you call another student to also try. Now, when you give assignment 2, it is important for you to make the cautious effort to grade and let the student have the feedback, or let them have their script so that they will know how they performed. All that we are saying is that assessment should be encouraged with prompt feedback. It is also important as teachers for us to give a lot of exercises or homework for our students to do, because practice makes a man perfect. Remember our Pavlov dog. It was through repetition, it was through exercise, all right? Because the act was repeated over and over and over before the dog associated the ringing of the bell, the presentation, and the presentation of the food. All right. So it is important as teachers for us to give a lot of exercises to our students, because by doing those exercises, it will help them to stamp in the right responses, or it will help them to become perfect. Teachers can also use the behaviorism principles to teach concepts that require memorization. So, for example, multiplication timetable. You can adopt the behaviorist principle. You know, they believe that we learn through stimulus-response connection. So you are teaching your, let's say, primary 1 pupils how to recite 3 times 3. So you say it, and then they will also repeat after you. To say it, they repeat after you until such a time that they will be able to achieve the goal that you have set for them. We also have drill and practice software that can be used to teach contents such as multiplication. And as educational technologies, when we design online course, for example, we need to take into consideration some of these principles that we are discussing, like the repetition, or what we call the drill and practice. We have a software, and apart from that, you can also design your course online in such a way that students will take quizzes, they will do assignments, submit the assignment online, and remember, we talk about helping your learners to learn at their own pace. And one of them, the ways that we can help our learners to learn at their own pace, is by making use of asynchronous learning tools like the V-Class or the UUW LMS, Learning Management System. Because in that case, the instructor will upload the learning materials. The student will determine the time or the period to download the information. The student will also determine where to sit to read the information, on which device, whether the student wants to read information via Android phone, or download the information and print, or read the information through or via a laptop or a desktop. Okay, so at this point, the telephone lines will be activated, and you can phone in for a question in case you have a question, or if you want to contribute to the discussion, you can do that. The line to reach us is 0503 923158, and save goes for WhatsApp and SMS 050 392 3158. Facebook, Radio WINNEBA 98.3 FM. Radio WINNEBA 98.3 FM. Okay, whilst I'm waiting for your contributions, comments, and questions, I want to say that, all right, do we have a caller on the line? Okay. Please, your name and program.
Hello.
Hello. Your name and program.
Hello.
Hello. Go ahead with your name and program, and then ask your question.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you. What's your name? Hello. Hello. Okay. I think we've lost connection. Okay. So let's talk about the criticisms that have been leveled against behaviorism. We have a caller on the line. Okay. And the line is off. I want us to look at some of the criticisms that have been leveled against behaviorism. We have a caller on the line. Please, your name and program.
My name is Kate Naomi. Okay. Please, I would like you to clarify the classical conditioning theory and the
operant. Is it operant?
And the operant conditioning theory. Please, I want to find out whether it is under the behaviorism or they are also learning theories on their own, please.
Okay, that's a good question. Now, I talk about 3 learning paradigms: behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. And I made a point that every... Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yes, your question.
Hello, doctor. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, doctor. Good evening.
Yeah, your name and program. And after that, I will continue addressing the first caller. Yes. Your name and question. Okay. So I made a point that we have learning theories associated with each of the learning paradigms. So, for example, if you take the behaviorism learning paradigm, we have classical conditioning and then operant conditioning. They're under behaviorism. So you got it right. Classical conditioning theory and then operant conditioning theory, they are associated with behaviorism. Now remember, I said when we say a paradigm, okay, it has to do with a way of thinking about something or the real world. So learning paradigm simply means the way a group of individuals or some people think of how people learn. So if you are talking about behaviorism, then we are looking at, yes, we have a caller on the line.
Hello.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead with your name and yes, your name.
My name is Felix Kumpiele.
Okay.
The Geography Department.
Okay.
Please, you made a point that if a student is able to recite maybe 1, 2, 3 up to 20, a learning has taken place. So my question is, if the students are not able to recite maybe the 1, 2, 3 up to the 20, does it mean that learning has not taken place or what?
All right, good question. Now, as teachers, when we are teaching or before we start teaching, we set objectives. Remember, this presentation, I said by the end of this section or this radio lecture, you should be able to define learning from the perspective of the behaviorists. And I also said that you should be able to discuss at least 4 educational implications. That is the objective I have set for this radio lecture. Now, so let's take it that the teacher set the goal that by the end of that instructional period, his or her pupils should be able to recite 1, 2, 3 up to 20. So if they are able to do that, it means the teacher has achieved his or her goal. Now, remember I also made a point that you do not expect all your learners, all right, to be able to recite or to be able to understand the concept or be able to do the exercise that you have assigned. And so there is a need for us to set objectives that we can achieve, or at least the minimum one. So it's a good question because we need to set objectives so that the weaker ones in the classroom will also be catered for. So for example, we can set objectives that by the end of the lesson, at least every student in the classroom should be able to recite up to 10, for example. Now, and I know some may not be able to do it. It doesn't mean that learning has not taken place, except that the teacher has not achieved his goal or her goal. Now, I use the 1 to 20 just to buttress my point that if a learner is able to accomplish a task set by the teacher, it means at the end of the instructional period, it means learning has taken place. Hello, we have a caller on the line. We have a caller on the line. Yes, go ahead.
Hello.
Your name and program, and then your question.
Please, my name is Abraham Rue from English Department.
Okay, go ahead with your question.
Okay, so please, my question is that last week when we met you for educational technology lecture, you said that when you come in class, the students have something that you have to bring them out so that you can use it and then build upon it.
Okay, when we were discussing the concept of education.
Sorry?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
My name is Abraham, and I'm calling I'm from English Department.
Yeah, I have understood your question. You said when we were discussing the concept of education, I said
educational technology. Yes, you said when you started, you said you were asking a question, and you said as a teacher, when you come to class, do not perceive as if the student they don't know anything. So you have to ask them questions so that they will tell you the knowledge about what you are coming to teach them, so that you build upon it.
Yes.
And I want you to clarify this for me. Today you are saying that as teachers, when they are teaching, they should be careful with what they teach their students, because the students, they don't know anything, so they should be careful with what they teach them, because that is what the students are going to use as and when they go out of the class. So that's why I wanted to call so that you clarify what you said.
All right. Okay. Good observation. Now, remember, we are not discussing learning paradigms. We're discussing the concept of education. Now, what I was trying to say is that the learner has something to offer. You don't have to assume that the learner's head is empty. Now, according to the behaviorists, this is not general, something general. Remember, we are discussing different learning paradigms, and this is the first one. Next week we'll talk about cognitivism, and then the third week constructivism. So from the perspective of the behaviorist, the learner is viewed as tabula rasa. All right. So it is the duty of the teacher to fill the learner's head with information. Now, it doesn't mean, so we're going to discuss the criticisms that have been leveled against behaviorism before the course started coming in. So you are right. This is one of the criticisms that have been leveled against behaviorism. It is not true that the learner's head is empty, okay? Because when the learner comes to the classroom, the learner comes to the classroom with some experiences. And when we discuss constructivism, you will come to understand that to the constructivist, the learners construct their own knowledge. We have a caller on the line. Please, your name,
Hello.
a program, and question.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, go ahead. Your name.
Hello, doctor. Good evening.
Good evening.
This is Talata.
Okay, Lady Talata, go ahead
Hello.
with your. Yeah, go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Good evening, doctor, and then good evening, my colleagues who are listening.
Okay.
I want you to know that today I'm with you. I'm online.
All
so
right.
I'm also listening.
You are getting 1 point.
And I'm enjoying the lesson. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
All right. Okay. I have. So please, you need to pay attention. All right. You have to pay attention so that you can follow the lesson. Now, remember, I said from the perspective. Yeah, we have a caller on the line.
Hello.
Yes, your name, program, and your question.
Yeah, hello. Good evening, doctor.
Good evening.
Yeah, please. My question is based on the type of punishment.
Okay.
I am Edmond, Geography Department.
All right.
Yeah. For example, if an instructor has instructed a student to do an assignment, and probably she refused for the first time, and she asks him or her to do it again for the second time, and she refused. Maybe for a number of times she refused. So what will you do to her? What are the next steps to take again to, like, erase this kind of bad attitude of that particular student?
All right. So it depends on the level. Okay. If you are teaching hello. If you are teaching children, hello, let me okay. Do we have another caller? Okay. Now, it depends on the level that you are teaching. If you are teaching children or pupils, obviously they cannot tell you they will not do it. But if you are teaching adult, and for that matter, let's say university students. Now, yeah, we have a caller on the line. Go ahead with your name, program, your name.
Yes, sir, good evening.
Your name, program, and then your question.
Yes, please, I'm Art Education.
Okay.
Please, my question is that I got to know that reinforcement is something the facilitator would do to make the learner push hard in his studies. But let's assume maybe the teacher has smart to compliment students on good performance, and all of a sudden the students are being overexcited and he has go astray. Maybe in the course of his studies he has calmed down. Maybe the studies have been to limitation. He hasn't keeping the effort he used to make. Just that the teacher said something like that. And I want to know, when the teacher didn't achieve that kind of smile and that kind of thing he did to reinforce the student to learn, can you say the teacher has punished the student, or what he did is still reinforcement?
Come again. The last part, I didn't get it. When the teacher...
Okay, reinforcement. I want to know if the aim for the facilitator to achieve a reinforcement goal on the side of the student, if it is not achieved, is punishment or still it remains reinforcement?
Now, reinforcement is anything, we said anything that causes a behavior to be repeated, desirable behavior. So the student has given right response to a question, and you have praised the student, or you gave an assignment and the student was able to score 10 out of 10, and then your remarks, excellent, keep it up. This is a reinforcement or something to encourage the learner to repeat that behavior or that good behavior. Now, if for some reason the student is no longer performing, as a teacher, you need to call the student, find out, maybe the student is having some difficulty or some challenges, all right? So you need to talk to the student and find out what is really going on, and then put in the necessary structures or measure that will help the student to come up. All right, another caller. All right, now let me respond to the student who asked a question about a student refusing to do an assignment. And I said, if you are teaching at the lower level or pre-tertiary, then no student will tell you that I'm not going to do the work. But at the university level, you are an adult, so you decide whether you want to fill the course or not. So assignment has been given. If you are not going to do the assignment, here we don't punish, okay? So all that the teacher or the instructor will do is to give you 0, because assignment has been given, a deadline was given. And even you, according to your narration, you were the learner was even given another chance to do it, and the learner refused. The learner was given, let's say, 3 chances. So what can the instructor do? All that the instructor will have to do is to assign as the grade that the student deserves. In that case, 0. Okay. So I was going to talk about the criticism that have been leveled against behaviorism. Now, somebody wanted me to clarify that when we were discussing the concept of education, I made a point that the learner has something to offer during the teaching and learning process. So it is the duty of the teacher to bring out that thing in the learner, or to involve the learners in the lesson delivery, or tap on or utilize their previous experiences. Yes, you are right. But the paradigm that we are discussing now is that of the behaviorist. That is their belief. All right. We have another caller on the line. Please, your name and program.
Yeah, my name is Abdul Kudus, Creative Art Department.
Okay.
Yeah. Later, I heard you said the teacher should plan or make like something like teaching and learning materials before going to class. So I was thinking, like, you know, we have different categories of students. Like we have the primary, the junior high, university, or senior high. Yeah. So I was thinking, like, you know, some children in the class, they don't have the attention in their class. But sometimes when we send certain things to the class to make as teaching and learning materials to show to them, they get interested and they would like to always come to class and pay attention whenever you are coming to class. So this is my suggestion.
So it's a contribution. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So behaviorism is okay. We have another caller. Your name and program. Your name and program. Hello. Hello. You don't have to worry about constructivism and cognitivism. We will discuss cognitivism next week, and then the next 2 weeks we are going to talk about constructivism. For now, let's concern ourselves with behaviorism. All right, we have a caller on the line. Your name and program, please. Your name and program. Your name and program. Your name and program.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Please, my name is Franklin.
You need to lower your volume, please.
Please, for the educational implications.
All right. So one of the criticisms that have been leveled against behaviorism is that it does not prepare the learner for problem solving or creative thinking. But if everything is about the teacher, it's the teacher who has to initiate that, and then there is also the emphasis on rote learning or memorization. Do we have a caller? Okay, your name and program. Your name and program. Your name and program. Don't be scared. You'll get 1 point. All right? Don't be scared. Go ahead with your question or contribution. All right? Okay. All right. With behaviorism, there is too much emphasis on rote learning, or the teacher, everything is about the teacher. Please do not confuse yourself with the concept of education that we discuss.
Hello.
Hello. Your name and program, and then your question. All right. Do not confuse yourself with the concept of education that we discussed last week with the learning paradigm that we are talking about. Now, we talked about 3 learning paradigms. All right. So when I made a point that to the behaviorists, all right, the learner has nothing to offer during the teaching and learning process. That is their belief. It doesn't mean that is true, all right? And when we are discussing, or when we talk about cognitivism, you will learn that, yes, it is not always the case. The teacher can initiate the learning process. The learner can also initiate. And that is why we have self-learning. You can learn, you can take a material and learn it yourself. You can go online and learn something yourself. All right. So it's not all the time that the teacher has to initiate. And if you could remember, last week when we were learning about the concept of education, we talked about the fact that the teacher is an instructor, a facilitator. As a teacher, you have to see yourself or your role as a facilitator. You facilitate. It is not your duty to put ideas into the heads of the learners. Okay? Don't assume that they don't have anything in their minds. They have something to offer. We are only discussing the learning paradigm from, yes, okay.
My question is that you made mention something about the creativity, about the behaviorism.
Yeah.
So, if it is that the learner should not bother himself with the critical thinking, then how then would learning occur? If the learner did not think very well to know where he's going and then what it is about to.
Okay, now, from the perspective of the behaviorist, the learner is a passive recipient of environmental stimuli. What this means is that the learner is not active or has nothing to offer. Now, and you also notice that as far as behaviorism is concerned, there's too much emphasis on rote learning, because to the behaviorist, the learner or organisms learn through stimulus-response connection. All right, and I gave you an example. If you are teaching learners multiplication table, for example, the teacher will have to teach the students because they don't know. So the teacher will recite and the student will repeat after the teacher. That process will be repeated until such a time that the learners or the pupils will be able to recite, for example, multiplication table 2 times 2. All right, let's say up to 10 or 15, or as set or defined by the teacher. All right, so there's too much emphasis on rote learning. All right, so as far as this learning paradigm is concerned, the learner is only prepared for recall of basic facts or automatic responses or performing tasks. Now, we are not saying this theory is bad completely. You know, the best way to sharpen a knife is not to whet only one side of it. Now, there are good sides. It is not every lesson that we have a caller on the line. Please, your name and program, and then your question or contribution.
Doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead with your question.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Kataria.
All right.
From the Department of Food Energy.
All right. Your question or contribution.
Hello.
Hello. Please, your name.
Hello.
Yeah, your name and program, and then your question or contribution.
Please, I am Benny Strong Afro from the English department.
Okay.
Please, my problem is with the fixed. You were saying that behaviorism is not fixed or transitory.
Oh, okay.
So
we are talking.
I want you to elaborate
all right.
on it for me.
You know, to the behaviorists, learning is defined as relatively permanent change in behavior as a result of experience. Relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience. Now, I tried to explain the definition, and I said that why don't we have permanent change? Why do we have relatively permanent change? And I explained that relatively permanent change means that the change in behavior or learning, for that matter, it is neither fixed nor transitory. Because if it is permanent, it means that When you learn something, you are not going to forget. But when we learn, it comes to a time that we forget. All right. And that is why to them, the change in behavior, which they refer to as learning, it is not fixed. When it is fixed, it means it's permanent. And I said it is not transitory, because when you learn something, at least you will retain the information for some time. All right. So it is neither fixed nor transitory. Not that behaviorism is neither fixed, but rather the change in behavior. All right. Because they define learning as relatively permanent change in behavior as a result of experience. Relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience. Relatively permanent change. The change is not permanent. All right, because they have added relative. And the meaning is that it is neither fixed nor transitory. When you learn something, you may forget. All right. And then what do we mean by behavior in the context of that definition? Behavior is the learning outcome, or what the learner is able to do after the instructional experience. All right. And then experience. Experience. It could be an event or occurrence which can have an impression on the learner. And it could be an instructional experience, the encounter that the learner has had with the instructor. Okay? Or you read a material. That could be an experience. So you have learned something from the material. And remember, we said you can learn on your own. All right? It is not about the teacher. It's not all the time that the teacher has to initiate. But according to the behaviorist, everything is about the teacher. So it is not true. And next week, we are going to discuss cognitivism. And to the cognitivist, learning occurs through processing of information. All right? Through processing of information. And we'll discuss that next week. Now, to the behaviorist, when you talk of learning, it means we see a change in your behavior. And that change in behavior can occur through stimulus-response connection. And new behaviors to the behaviorists. New behaviors or changing in behaviors are acquired through association between stimulus and response. It means human organisms learn through stimulus and response connection. And I gave an example that the teacher who wants to teach something about fruit can show, let's say, apple. Show the apple to the learner, and then you say apple. Now, if you repeat that process according to the behaviorist, if you repeat that process over and over, there will be a time that when you show the apple to the learner will be able to say apple without the teacher's intervention or help. All right. I think our time is almost up, so we'll bring the lesson to a close. And like I said, next week we are going to discuss cognitivism. So join us same time, 5:30 to 7 p.m. next week, Thursday. Bye for now.
That's all he can beat, the magic producer.